The other day at my job, a parent came in to drop off their child, and the child was glued to his phone. It was like inches away from her face. And the second dad took away the phone, she screamed so loud, threw the biggest fit. Mind you, it's 7 a.m. No child should be looking at any screens this early in the morning, much less a 3-year-old. Throughout my speech, I will provide a brief overview of television shows for young children and how they've changed over time, how they've negatively impacted our young children, other ways we can help our child aside from screen time. Today I will persuade you as to why we should limit screen time for young children. I will start by persuading you in the changes of television shows for young children, then convince you on how screen time negatively affects their development, and provide better alternatives. Finally, I will cover the counter-argument that unlimited screen time positively affects young children. So I grew up in the 2000s, and a lot of the shows I watched were Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Sesame Street, pretty much anything PBS related. In the article, Lessons from History of Children's Television, the original distance learning, it states that Sesame Street, which premiered in 1969, the same year we landed on the moon, represented a giant leap for children's television. Sesame Street was a catalyst for children's TV shows. It took an urban setting and puppets and connected to the children and interacted with them, made the messages come alive. Nowadays, children are watching animated shows such as Paw Patrol and Cocomelon. And Cocomelon has been found to be very fast-paced and often containing no messages. In an article from Fordham Ram by Eleanor Smith, an assistant opinion editor, she watched the show and found that the show lacked any sort of dialogue or overachieving plot. In one song, Baby JJ gets ready for bed, and in the other, ducklings leave the nest. Each of the segments was completely unconnected to the other segments in the show. The resulting episode watches like a compilation of YouTube videos that was made for toddlers than anything regarding a normal episode of TV. Children's television nowadays has changed drastically from the slow-paced, loving, educational content to a higher pace, overstimulating mess. This leads me to my next point. Now that I've given a brief overview of how television has changed compared to now, let me tell you how this affects our young children. We found that children these days are watching overstimulating shows. You pair this with an unregulated amount of screen time, this leads to negative effects in their child development. In a study from the National Library of Medicine, they found that children who engage in 2 or more hours of screen time per day, or 3 or more hours per day, are more likely to experience behavioral problems and have poor vocabulary acquisitions compared to those who engage in less than an hour. Take Cocomelon, for example. There was a craze a while back that basically stated that Cocomelon was crack for babies. It was so overstimulating that kids would have withdrawals, essentially, from the show. And in a Forbes article, it went over how the relentless pace of the show may contribute to a need for instant gratification, where children expect instant, constant stimulation and struggle to engage in activities that require sustained effort and concentration. This is possibly why we see kids nowadays with such short attention spans. I work with children, and a lot of them are Cocomelon babies, and it shows. They can hardly sit still for an activity. They need constant stimulation just to focus on a simple task at hand. And now that I've given you an idea of how much screen time can affect young children, I'm going to give you better alternatives. Speaking as someone who works in child development and has done lots of research, the best thing you can do for your child is to be engaged with them. Hands-on learning, having children go outside, go explore nature, something as simple as reading a book to a child can develop their language skills. Just being present with your child as opposed to giving them endless unsupervised screen time is the best thing you can do. When I was a child, screen time was very regulated, maximum an hour, when it was always supervised. Now that I've told you a few alternatives to giving child screen time, let me tell you why people think screen time should be unregulated. I found different blogs from different parents who rave about giving their child unlimited screen time. In a blog from Parent Life Network, it states that it builds trust, a calmer home environment. And in another blog from Today's Parents, it states how they have unlimited screen time, but they set rules. No screen time an hour after waking up, no screen time in the cars. It always has to be supervised. So with this, they're still monitoring what their child is watching. There is no unlimited amount. There is no screen time in the cars, no screen time after an hour waking up. they're still monitoring what their children are watching, and there's no such thing as unlimited amount of screen time, as much as they'd like to say that's what they're doing. So today I've talked about the difference between children's television then and now, and I went over how screen time has negatively affected children's development. I also provided some healthy alternatives. Finally, I gave a counter argument to why children should have unlimited screen time. So next time you want to give a child screen time, think about how it can negatively affect their development. If it is absolutely necessary that you give them screen time, which it rarely is, remember to limit and supervise it, and if anything, show them something like Sesame Street as opposed to Cocomelon.